So, have you ever looked at the digital color meter? I think we might have done that. Seems to me we did it when you were in my 2353 class. All right. That's the digital color meter. And whatever spot, can you all see what I'm doing here? Whatever spot you are over, notice that it tells you this LAB value. Let's see if I can bring this up. You can display in native values and sRGB. You see, if you do any of these things, what it's doing is it's taking the value and it's determining what the monitor calibration is doing to it. You know, when you go through the monitor calibration situation, you have that choice, right? But you can do either in generic or Alice, but so LAB is the way to go. And so if you find, and this happens all the time, people will say, I want that color. All right, now there's two things you can do. If that color is a thing, then you get it out the Pantone book. Right? Find it, touch it. Right? And if it's on a monitor, what you can do is this. I don't know if I told this class, but a former colleague of mine who's retired is big in the Democratic Party. And she emailed me and said, I need to know what color in RGB the Democratic blue is. Oh, send me an example. And so it's amazing the amount of ignorance in our field. It turned out that she didn't want to know the RGB value. She wanted to know what color of screen printing paint should be used. All right, but you get the idea? Is that sometimes you got a problem and somebody gives you a color. What color is this? And so I told her, send me an image that as the color you want, and I'll tell you what the RGB values are. What I did is I measured just this way. I opened the file. I measured it just this way. Then I went into Photoshop and I found what the values were. Now, why didn't I could do this in RGB, couldn't I? But her monitor, I know her enough to know that her monitor is not calibrated. All right, so if I use the RGB values there, then the RGB values that it shows me will be dependent upon the calibration of this monitor. Actually, not that monitor, but this one. Okay, yeah? So it's a little bit confusing, but that's a good tool. All right, that's very valuable to have. And again, display it in LAB, because remember the machine is thinking in LAB. All right, it shows you colors in RGB, but it takes that color and passes it through the profile that you have set for your monitor, doesn't it? We looked at that this morning and it worked. I showed you how changing those settings changes the RGB values of the color. All right, that's one tool that's well worth your knowledge. Okay, and the other one is the color sync. Again, you may have seen this before. I know I've showed it sometimes, but not all the time. So the color sync utility is a way for you to get an idea. Have you seen this before? Okay. You can take a profile, and you have more profiles on the computers in the lab than I have here, but I've got enough, right? But you have made some. Remember, you did your grayscale profiles and all that kind of stuff. All right, but here I'm going to take the sRGB. All right, there's sRGB. Can you see the shape of the? And if you look at it, do you see that that's on the horseshoe? All right, with the blue and the green and the opposite. Do you see where it is? But you also see this not much of that, because the real horseshoe would be way up here somewhere. Right? You've seen that, and you know that this is a shape. Now, how many points does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right. It's 6 points. All right. Why?
3 dimensions.
It's
3 axes.
it's a hexagon. All right. Why? Because you end up having the red, green, and blue, right? Yes?
Yes.
And the combinations of red and green make yellow. All right, green and blue make cyan, and red and blue make magenta. All right, those are the points on the curve. Right? So, if you haven't done this, you can also take this and turn it and look at it. Remember, one of the things that is not very intuitive about this whole LAB thing is that whenever you see an image like that, you're really looking at the flat, the plane, but it's a three-dimensional object, okay, with black point way up here. All right, so what this allows you to do is you can take this and turn it over, and you can see the third dimension, okay? Now, I think that's pretty cool. I need to get this back as straight as I can here. Is that fairly straight? Yeah, not really, huh? Okay, so let's go to the Adobe RGB, and you see how much bigger it is. That's important for you to see right now, right? To see that is much bigger than the sRGB. That's why we use Adobe RGB in print. If you go back to the image I showed you last week of the horseshoe of the CIE color space, some of the CMYK gamut is bigger than parts of the RGB gamut. Okay, some of it is bigger, and it shows different colors better. Print does a better job of some colors than monitors do. I know that you find that very hard to believe because you've been raised to think that computers are perfect, but they're not. All right, print does a much better job, especially in greens and some blues. All right, so think about that. So we have this, which is bigger. That's the main thing I wanted to show you about it. Then a generic CMYK. Oh, you need to look at this as I'm changing it. The Adobe RGB to generic CMYK. And you see that overall it's much smaller. Okay? So I've done this before. What you can see, what a monitor shows you, what print shows you. Right? But kind of keep that in mind. And you can see what that generic does. You can, if I can find it, by the way, there's HGTV. Right? And there's a whole bunch of other ones. All right, let's see if I can find the Grackle. Here, this is Grackle. Okay, that's Grackle, and this is Swap. All right, can you see that? Let's look at it again. Watch it, please. Grackle. All right, you see the size of the color space, and then I go to Swap, and note that it's smaller in some sections. That's why when we changed today, the CMYK values changed. Remember, we changed from Grackle to Swap. The CMYK values changed because that gamut is a little bit smaller. Okay, so this is really not a tool to measure, so to speak, like the densitometer is a tool to use to measure density. It's not like a colorimeter that measures LAB or a spectrophotometer that measures 31 bands of the spectrum. But it can show you what those look like. So if you create a profile of a device, we can look at it and get an idea of how it compares. So let's look at, let's see if they have, US newsprint. Okay, so there's a web-coded, which is typical magazine publication, or publication like a, what would I say, a catalog. All right, and if I go to newsprint, you see how it changes its shape, okay? Uncoded, you see how they're all different, right? Especially on the outside. The colors towards the white, if you look at all of these CMYK that I'm showing you, all of them are okay in the middle, aren't they? But it's the outside that changes. So this tool is kind of interesting for you to be able to look at profiles and get an idea of size, shape, etc. Now we've done the color picker in Photoshop, so I don't need to talk